Hello everyone, and welcome back. Hope you had a nice break. And what we're here now for I suppose the final part of this hybrid event, which is going to be the panel discussion.
Yeah.
What Tom would have mentioned at the start when we were looking at the graphic harvest, or mentioned that we had a graphic harvester online, Maya Thomas, is that we use this at this point here to share, I suppose, the draft of each of the speakers' talk. So Tom, I can share it there if you want to maybe discuss.
So, and just to be, Maya does brilliant work here. So she's made Tomáš look very, very handsome and very, very debonair like that. Yeah, but she's a great artist, but she's not a miracle worker. She couldn't make me look attractive or put a full head of hair on me. But no, I think they are really great part of sort of, conferences and events there like that. And as I said, this is literally, to be fair to her, these are all hot off the press there, so to speak, there like that. But as I said, I love the thing there, fill in the blank, cats and dogs. And I think the point that Tomáš was saying, they said like that. One, I suppose it's only as good as you're putting it in, but it's that level of intuition. So I thought the use of the apple example was really good, because if it's something devoid of context, it's certainly not going to give you the sort of stuff then that you can help. I like the one, as I said, I'm just picking a few of them here, but they can help with the linguistic equity, and I think that's a really good point, because certainly in terms of
the camera.
I'm past the camera. I beg you. My back's to the camera. My apologies. The beauty of having one eye, so I don't see things. But as I said, with the linguistic equity, I think that's one of the things that, and certainly in the work myself and Nick were doing, that one of the real benefits of generative AI is for people who English is not their first language. Having said that, it can work in a negative way as well. So we've seen some of those issues there.
It's a nice one. I like just at the bottom right there that you got the curve as well, Maya, online. The expectation curve. That was a nice one, because I liked Tomáš, the way he mentioned about the internet. Like at the start, when the internet kicked off, everyone was worried, and so there was that peak, and then it did trough, and then it has definitely leveled out. So it was a very nice analogy. Let's go to Angela's next. So here we have.
So Angela, I love your long flowing locks there in the picture there like that. I think, as I said, I think the roadmap, and one of the things that really struck me there, and you were saying, like, it's a very supportive attitude that you're talking about. It's not waving a big stick. And I think like policies implies maybe a level of strictness and solidity, which maybe is not appropriate, but I think like something like a roadmap, something which provides guidance, I think is a really nice way of putting it. They create, own it, and be proud of it. The crop, I have to say, and then just chatting to people there, I think it's a really, really lovely. I think that's something that a lot of people are going to take away from today. And that's the thing, because we talk about what makes us human, that innate stuff. I think that the Croppet is a really nice way of, rather than sort of like waving a big stick and being really bound by policies to the extent, if you don't get people to buy into stuff, you can have all the policies, rules and regulations you want, but if you were sort of that idea of the culture, so I think that's going to be one of the big takeaways.
Brilliant. And just got the marriage in there as well, Angela. That was up there in the kind of the top center there. Research supervision is a relationship like a marriage. Really nice thing. Because it was just a nice kind of way that you started off yours as well. So look, we'll move on to the final one then. And look, these are not a final version. They'll be massively impressive. Like when you think of Maya, we have 45 minutes for Angela's talk, including questions. And this is the output here. So phenomenally impressive, Maya. And then the last one here is Nick.
I just love that whole unshaven Australian outback look. And I think
see that full day of traveling has told yesterday.
I just love that she took the grey out as well.
I'll ask her to put that back in the final version. Because we don't want to have hallucinations and giving the impression that you're actually younger than you actually are, then like that. So I think some of the tools that he was outlining today, as I said, the Google, the Scholar AI will write a paper for you. I think in terms of the context of the research integrity and the topic of the day, the whole idea of what knowledge production is and who owns stuff and accountability, I don't know if we're more afraid or less afraid after today, but we're certainly far more informed.
Brilliant, yeah, absolutely. And what was, again, I just made one comment. I did like the blockbuster mentioned that view. So it was nice to kind of see that coming up here. Lovely, very nice. Thanks very much, Maya.
Thank you, Maya.
Most impressive, most impressive. Thanks very much. Okay, I think what we'll do, so what we said before, we thought that maybe just at the start of the, like, there's a good few questions that we have from the Slido app, but we thought we might just add to them first by asking just 2 additional questions using Slido, just to kind of get everyone's thoughts, and then we'll open up the floor to the questions that we have for the for the panel. Yes, that was the last open-ended response that we got to your question, Nick. Okay, so Sinead, if you don't mind, yeah.
So, are you more or less hopeful about the future of research integrity after today's sessions? I'll get my question too. Well, I suppose one of the positive things is that the less is 14, but the more is 29. And look, it's I think in some ways I'm happy that at least it's the same as before. We haven't gone backwards. I think what I would like that comes out of today, or anybody watching these videos afterwards, is that you're certainly far more informed and encouraged to have a go. Bearing in mind some of the things we've talked about. I mean, the more hopeful now is 33%. So yeah, I think, look.
No, I just think it's to get a sense of it.
Yeah.
No, absolutely. Sinead, to go to the next one there, so it'd be great, please.
Any final thoughts at the end of this series of talks about research integrity and the responsible use of GenAI? That's a bit more of an open-ended one, so that might take people a little bit longer to type up. But yeah, as I said, this is just while we're waiting for people to type in things and your own thoughts on. I suppose, and I'm asking you as people who are presenting, but maybe you were also listening to the 2 other speakers. So in order of presentation, Tomáš, Angela, and then Nick. So any sort of, what was your initial thoughts when the sessions finished this morning? Forget about your own talk, just the other 2. What was your own sort of, my God, or?
Well, I always learn about the tools that I didn't know before, so that's like plenty of them, and yeah, but it's going to stabilize over the years. But my final thought that from the point of view of research integrity, the fundamentals don't change. Yeah, so the challenges will be still there. There will still be honest scientists who now get the tool that increases their productivity, but also there are bad guys who are trying to get as many publications as possible, no matter how, and they also are getting the tools that help them. So maybe it scales up the problems that we have faced before, but as I said, nothing new in principle.
Yeah. I think that's from Angela.
Thanks, Tom. I suppose it's heartening to see that we're all on the same page. And I suppose what would be more worrying is if, we found out that either of us had a great solution and that we were so far behind that we would never catch up. I think everybody is struggling with it. I think universities are struggling with it, higher education institutions, colleagues, students in particular. So I think what's going to be very important, I think we all touched on it, is that it's going to be about having conversations, and these obviously events like this where we're chatting and discussing and having time, giving time to it. It's great to have time, and I know not everybody has time because people are busy. So I think maybe the takeaway is to ring fence some time for staff and students, so we can chat and have open discussions and in a safe space. I always talk about the safe space. Nobody's judging you. So.
Yeah,
I
think it's a good, very good point.
And actually just spotted one that's come in there just as Angela was speaking, reassuring that the panel are consistent and in the same boat. I think that maybe speaks that, when you think of, like, we've Canada, Czechia, and
Oh,
Ireland.
yeah.
I'm trying to think what country
We're here, we're here.
but like we're all consistent.
Well travelled, but we're here.
Yeah, so which is really good, So
Yeah.
Or the People's Republic of Cork.
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, so Nick.
Yeah, I think the same. I always love, hearing that, what you're working on, and it's reassuring to know that we're on the same, thinking about the same kinds of issues. We're coming at them from different lenses, but the issues are the same. And the work of actually getting at how grad students are experiencing it and what it's doing to them, not just, thinking about how do we stop them doing something, but how do we promote and create a culture of integrity, I think is the same issue that we've been trying to work on forever. And it's the solution to most of the problems that we've faced in the past. And maybe that's the human part that still exists, right? The fact that we can sit together in a room and have this conversation. We could practice doing that with an AI tool, but this bit is actually really important.
Yeah.
And if we've got to try and figure out what it means to be human, what does it mean to create new knowledge, what does it mean to know or to be intelligent, maybe these are the bits that we keep. And hopefully maybe some of the tools do give us a bit more space to do that, because they take up some of the things that take us so long, give us time back. If that's the case, I mean, lots of other tools we thought don't do that. But if it was, then that would be a great outcome for us.
Yeah. Very good. Okay, so I think we could we might touch base to take that going every so often, but maybe just a question we had on the app there earlier. And it was a technical question, so Tomáš, we'll hand this to you because it was in relation to your talk at the time. So for scientific idea generation, will it get a strong scientifically worked idea from LLMS? I mean, are we just playing with the language, or do you see it?
Sorry, what was that?
So I'm just are just playing with the language, or so how do you see it? How do you see this scientific worked idea from LLMS?
About the novelty of the idea that comes from the model.
Yes.
I can hear this opinion quite often, that it is not able to generate anything new because it just recycles what it learned from the previous data. But honestly, this is basically the same thing that humans do. That we also learned from some previous data, and we deduct new things, and the various AI tools have proven to come up with new ideas. Like Nick mentioned, AlphaGo invented completely new Go strategies just by playing against itself and reinforcement learning. And in principle, it's the same what happens with the scientific idea and like new concepts that are being generated on top of the previous knowledge. So I believe that it is able to come up with new things, and I think that we will see it in the near future a lot.
You were nodding there, Nick. Do you want to?
I just want to add to that too. One of the other things that we hear all the time is I think people mix up older versions of algorithmic approaches that are designed to predict things, whereas this is designed to generate things. And one of the ways that it does that from a statistical point of view is it adds stochasticity to it. So it's deliberately designed to add randomness to it. And that's how it generates things that we might not come up with, but it's doing that in the same way that our brains do.
Brilliant. Okay, so and then that, because you touched on it there, Tomáš mentioned it. I think this is one. Maybe Angela might come in on this first. So, but this is to all three speakers. So, how do the speakers feel about AI potentially reducing researchers' critical thinking skills, and do they think it matters in the long run? Will critical thinking be something we delegate to an AI in the future?
I would be very concerned about the critical thinking element, because I suppose that's the whole point, isn't it, of PhD work and postgraduate work. Is, what is this big contribution to knowledge? I mean, and I suppose when you think about critical thinking, it's the key thing, and it's what we want our students to take away, isn't it, from higher education. And I suppose when I think about, we have discussions with colleagues that, if you look at the likes of Leonardo da Vinci and, the early concepts of the helicopter and all of that, and, that was coming out of his brain where he was thinking, and, I think we'll always have to have that criticality. I think it's going to be vital for us.
Yeah. Tomáš, Nick, do you want to say anything on that?
Yeah, I have read some papers about experiments on like using AI tools in teaching programming, because that programmers now are using these tools a lot in practice. So they basically don't write code anymore. They just get the code generated from the AI copilot, and then they have to adjust it to do exactly what they want. That they have to properly test that it works how it was intended. So which actually requires higher order thinking, not only producing the code, but understanding and critical assessment of the code. So in this case, it actually promotes critical thinking instead of more than traditional learning.
And I think, Tomáš, you talked about it too. I teach, at the moment I'm teaching teacher candidates, so pre-service teachers. And one of the things that we've been working on a lot recently is at what point should you be introducing these tools to kids, to young kids, because that foundational knowledge is still critical. You can't really progress or even effectively and responsibly use a tool like this without having that foundation first.
It's interesting. It's kind of like when you show the child the calculator.
Yeah.
I think that's, I mean, one of the things I've heard about is the people have no problem with GenAI reducing the cognitive load as long as you have the learning load. And you know, one of my things I'm involved in is as one of the editors of the Irish Journal of Technology Enhanced Learning. And we put out a call last year, and we asked people to co-author with GenAI. We were saying, let's meet this head on. And I mean, one of the papers that struck me was they spoke about a subject that they had done for their masters. They'd put in the hard yards, they'd learned. So when GenAI produced the output, they were able to use those cognitive faculties and to really, think about, make those evaluations. But they could only do it because they put in the learning and had done their masters and had done the hard work. The fear is if you haven't put in the hard yards and you simply you are in no position to critically evaluate the outputs. And I think that's the issue.
It's a nice comment there. I mean, all these comments are good, but I get a sense that we don't need to be afraid of GenAI as being a monster that will destroy everything. I think that's important. Like, it's just a case of how to engage with it, but engage with it responsibly. So it seems like the inherent process of research will keep bringing us back to AI's limitations and human interference. Bad actors always exist, with or without AI.
Yeah, I think that was the point you all made today. Plagiarism has always existed. Essay mills. Yeah. So, as you said, okay, we now have put it on steroids, the tools which are available to us. But it's as if dishonesty never existed before.
That was something that you picked up on, Tomáš, and yours from ENAI, wasn't it? That they said, look, it's not new. What's happening. It's just accelerated.
Yeah, I think that was a really, from the ENAI, I remember I was sitting there going, yeah, that's hitting the nail on the head. And you talked about the essay mills. They've
it's
always.
Just a new way of looking at it.
Yes.
And we need to prepare. We need to be prepared, and
Okay.
So the difference too is that we, in the past, the concept of plagiarism or of you bought something from an essay mill, there was a source for it that you could go back and find.
Yes,
and you could have it. You could have definitive proof.
Yeah.
We don't have that anymore. So that's the bit that's a little bit scarier.
There are less supports for us as academics, our legal basis, we can't challenge really.
It means your relationship, as you pointed out, your relationship is actually the only thing that holds you.
Exactly. We need to work in that marriage.
So are you going to be like a GenAI marriage marriage?
Very good. So a tricky one now, and this is something that we touched on earlier on in terms of where is that line. So a question that was asked and was acknowledgement of AI in research papers. When do you acknowledge? In my research I'm publishing, if I use the AI to help me to finalize my code, how to do bits rather than search Google or my course notes, it's faster to use AI. And if I put it together and adapt it for my data, do I acknowledge the AI for this or not?
Yeah, we talked about it during lunch, and I think that the requirement to acknowledge all the tools will be less and less important. Now we are not acknowledging the text editor that we are using. Sometimes we are acknowledging statistical software that we use to our analysis, but sometimes not. And now it is new, so that the requirement is quite understandable here because it's not a standard yet. But as soon as it becomes a standard, and these GenAI tools that helps you craft the text while you are writing will be part of any text editor, then it's no need for enrichment anymore because everybody will be using it. Yeah? So if that enrichment appears in every paper, it doesn't bring any information value.
I agree.
At this moment, when you look at the journals, so you look at the publication guidelines, at this very moment, the majority of them say it's okay to use a tool, for example, for grammar or translation or your English checking, whatever. But in terms of processing the data, the majority of the moment aren't allowing it. Now, as Tomáš says, that will change, but it's just at this minute, if you were loading a paper, that's one of their guidelines, and you have to tick, your little tick box that you're responsible for what you're producing. So they are looking for that responsibility. How that will change remains to be seen as the tools evolve. But at the moment, you can. Most of the rules seem to say do not load content that has been generated using GenAI, as in your new data or contributions to knowledge or anything like that. And I suppose that makes sense for now, doesn't it? In a way, I know it's different for computer programming. I mean, you see, maybe. What do you think it's different?
All fields have some specific issues, but the researchers needs to do some programming to design the experiments, and it will be generated by the AI. So
I think there's I absolutely agree that this will fade into it's just a tool that we have now. Eventually. But at the moment, there's a good reason. There are two good reasons why acknowledgement would be appropriate. One, because if you are using it, you're probably doing something that's a little bit novel. And there's real value to us in understanding how people have used them. And as a reviewer, it would also be helpful to me to know which tool you used and how you used it, because it could be that the outcome is a problem because you chose the wrong tool, in the same way that you might have chosen the wrong statistical approach. So for me at the moment, I think that's why I would like to see it.
Could I jump this about reviewing, and I suppose wearing my editor's hat on, and also been asked to be a reviewer, it's getting increasingly difficult to get people to review. I mean, how would you feel if, 50% of every journal's reviews were done by AI? Because if you think about it, it's a hugely time-consuming task that we're expected to do as academics. More and more papers. So any thoughts about if you were submitting a paper and you were told one of your two reviewers is GenAI?
So I think we could very easily normalize that as a practice, and or each journal might have their own preferred tool that's going to do that for them, and you might be able to run it through before you even submit it. I was in a conversation with another editor recently who was thinking about the idea of just that, like playing with how they might integrate AI into their processes. And one of the things that they were thinking of doing was using an AI tool to provide a first round of review, providing that review to the reviewers so that part of the work was already done. So what you were focusing on then was, what has it missed? What has it misrepresented? What else can you add to that? So it would actually speed up the review process.
Yeah, it can actually very quickly do the things that human reviewers are, I don't want to say lazy to do, but that they don't have time to do. Yeah? Like recalculate all the statistics. So there is some table presented in the paper, then you have the raw data, and like checking whether the table actually represents the raw data. That's something that the reviewers should do, or the world would be much nicer if the reviewers would do that, but obviously they don't have time to do that. So now this can help a lot.
Angela?
I suppose the worry is then, how do you take it to the next level where, you do something very novel or critical or creative, and how is a tool or a bot or whatever going to actually guard that from, a program, So I suppose that would be, the worry would be, how will it be applied to creativity? and to novel thinking. Yes, it can do the tick boxes and say this meets the requirements and the word count is correct. You know, the kind of normal stuff, as you say, the app, you know, is within the guidelines, and, you know, things that drive us mad, like the formatting and all of this, you know, that's all okay, that's fine. But just the next level, you know, the critical part.
I actually, you're really good point, where I'm kind of thinking, even if we had because I know myself, if a bot had done the review, the stage 1 review, I wouldn't be worrying about the formatting and are the statistics correct. So it does free me the time to look at the higher, the creativity stuff.
To get into, you know, peel back the layers and see what are they really saying here. I
mean, regularly now we're having to ask 3 or 4 people to do a review before we actually get someone to do.
But remember as well that the criticism of AI at the moment is that it lacks criticality. You know, and if you see something like that paper that I was talking about earlier, Professor Debbie Cotton, her paper that she baked, and, you know, so proud of it. Like, the one thing about it was saying the same thing over and over and over. There was nothing deep about it. There was nothing critical about it. So I know that would change.
I think that's user error most of the time too. Like, I think a lot of the things that we see are novice users using the tools in a way that they've really not designed, or they just don't yet know how to structure the ask to get it to do the thing that they want it to do. But the vast majority of people are in that boat right now. The vast majority of people are using them in, you know, novice ways.
It was interesting, actually, just going back to one thing that you said there earlier, Nick, about if somebody had used the GenAI tool as part of maybe their publication, that it would be just useful to share, well, what tool was used, because maybe that tool has flaws in it. I suppose what I was reminded when you said that's my own background would be statistics, and I would use OR for my I suppose statistical analysis. But with anyone familiar with using OR, you often have to install additional packages to help to do particular tasks in OR. And I suppose in the material and methods, the papers, you'd say that you'd use OR, but then have also installed these additional packages, because those additional packages are, you kind of, maybe some of them are flawed in themselves, and a reviewer could actually pick up on that. So it's just interesting that you said that about the GenAI tools, and that's essentially what we are doing, just in another way. So it's just, the method is still there, it's just we're applying it now to a new topic. And it's just maybe some points then that come in that open-ended question there, very insightful. We need to embrace GenAI as other tech evolutions, like a calculator, like a calculator invention, which again is something that's been said here, and it links into that whole OR idea as well. It's really important for institutions to have living and fit-for-purpose guidance for responsible use of AI in research that's developed for and with the research community. I suppose this would speak to, like, are we more, and I think each one had touched on guidelines, like, are we more at, look, we don't go down the route of policy yet, because it's still evolving. And so is it a guideline document that we have that evolves over time? So if it's a living document, look, we're doing these certain things, we reference AI in these certain scenarios at the moment, but then things will change in AI, it might be more widely used. So now actually we don't reference it, the guideline document gets updated. It seems to be maybe a sensible approach, or what do you think?
I think so, and I think like some of the AI models take that approach too. So you look at Anthropic's Claude uses a constitutional model to manage risk, and it does that because the alternative is to try and figure out all of the bad things you want to filter out, and that's actually really difficult to do, and it changes really quickly. So something that's more principles based or constitution-like probably is most effective at the moment.
I suppose, I think I'm very strong in the do's and the don'ts at the moment, just listening to staff. So I think we do need something that's going to say, do this, don't do that. And I think then along with that, then the living document, because that is going to evolve. That, like, if you think about even, you know, when I started this role last January to June, to now, it's just incredible. I mean, I can't keep up with it, and my head is meant to be in it.
Yeah.
It just is impossible. So it's evolving so fast. But I think there are certain things that we can do around, you know, integrity. I think the integrity piece, and always having our plagiarism and doing good and trying to get that culture. The accountability. I think we can have a do and a don't there. So I think we can be very clear. I think there are top level areas that we can be very clear on, and then have the living. Yeah, I really do.
And as you were speaking to that before you actually started the question, well, more, I think it's a point that's made here on it, that came in the QA. Plagiarism and paper mills always existed. So too, they had clear institutional policies that made it clear these practices were unethical and not acceptable. What does a good AI policy look like?
Ooh.
What is a good
Everybody's ears are pricked up, and everybody all around the world is.
Well, funny enough, Oxford University have a policy, and they are saying they're considering it plagiarism. It's called out. I actually read it. They're calling it out. If you use GenAI, it's plagiarism. That's their take. I mean,
it always depends how you use it, for what you use it.
Exactly. You could peel back the layers, but and they define it. So I think
the downside of taking a really strong link, and this is just me speaking personally, is the detection tools, or the so-called detection tools, it's not something I would like to stand up in the High Court. And are universities running the risk of backing themselves into a legal corner?
I think you can keep it under, if you keep it under the plagiarism, in terms of, I think we can still, so when you look at it, is it going to be back to assessment, is it? The way we assess? Is it going to be back to that, clever ways of assessing and having more dialogue?
Yeah.
And I think, I suppose it's going to be discipline specific too, because obviously in mathematical and, computer sciences, it's going to be different to maybe, or the humanities. It's going to be discipline specific as well, I think. But I do think I think there are some simple takeaways where we can have the do's and don'ts, and then the living document that's going to be evolving the whole time. But are we going to be revisiting it every month?
What I want to say, I'm not really happy with having a living guidelines and the do's and don'ts like changing every month or every year. It's like really dangerous approach. So in 20 years, when I apply for a professorship or for some promotion, then people say, or my results that I did 20 years ago,
exactly.
and that time, like they say, hey, it's misconduct. Like what have you done? And now you want to become a professor, and I will very difficult. It will be very difficult to defend myself that I follow the guidelines that apply that time. So at least there should be some basic principles that we hope that won't change, and then in some details we can adapt. But I think that the good AI policy is the policy that will not change for at least 10 years.
That's going to be about new, your own new data. What have you worked on? What have you contributed to? I think that ball in the middle has to be. Can I keep
the tough questions going?
I think you have to own that piece, and therefore you can stand over it when you go for that promotion.
Well, that goes. Okay, so here's the question for each one of you. I'll let you come last, because this was really the stuff you were talking about. So you've been asked to talk imaginary to a group of new research supervisors. What's the one or two big things you're going to get them? They're really nervous about supervising now in an era of GenAI. So I'll start with Tomáš, Nick, and then I'll give the best word to Angela. Not the final word, the best word. So they're really nervous. They're going to go, what's supervision like? They got their PhD 10 years ago. It was a different world.
I would say, don't be nervous. You have the helper, you have the assistant here that can help you during the supervision. So does the student have any questions you don't know the answers? So ask the AI, or tell the student to ask the AI. So
okay,
I think it helps all of us, even the supervisors.
Nicholas.
I would say the same thing. I think you need to get to know your students. So spend the time getting to know who they are as a person, and absolutely expect that they're going to be using AI, and they may not even know that they are. So you need to have at least a base understanding of what tools they might be using, because you should also be thinking about, what does it actually mean in my discipline? What is AI? How does AI interact with my discipline? So at least I have a sense of what's possible and what's not possible. And then when I have those conversations with my student, that's when we want them to be open about the way that they're using things, in the same way that we would want them to be open about how they're thinking about using what their methodology is going to be, their statistics that they want to use. And it's our job at that point to help guide them towards things that they, pitfalls that they're going to run into.
Okay. Angela?
I suppose the top tip really is about, communication. And I suppose back to, I know it's a bit of a humorous thing, but I have in my slides about this marriage, you know, you're wherever you are saying I do when you're going along in this journey. But I think, you know, hopefully the supervisor is going to be an expert in the field, and just to bring that confidence to the table. And I suppose then you'll be instilling in your student, your future student, that they will in the future be the expert then in their field, you know, and how are they going to get to that end point? So if you want to be an expert, I think by the fact that you're going to have maybe some supports around, you know, tools support you no more than you're going to have your, you know, we're back to the, you know, the old fashioned typing or writing. You know, we have tools now that help us, but provide that in the future, they will need to have the total knowledge to be that expert in that particular field that they're in, the core of their knowledge. And how are they going to get to that? And I think that's going to involve peeling back a lot more layers, maybe than superficial.
You spoke about recommitting to supervision. Do you want to tease that one out?
Recommitting,
because that struck me, and I'd like to investigate
that came from colleagues that I was quite surprised. I'd met a number of colleagues at the beginning of last term, and you know, they had said that they'd stepped back from supervising, and that had just become too onerous, and the responsibilities in that, and particularly in the AI world, and one particular person that had had a negative experience with something that had happened. So I suppose that comes back to support structures and, you know, even workshops for supervisors to navigate it. And of course, we need a layer above. It's going to come from the universities, all our universities, you know, and go back to our guidelines, aren't we? And supports there. But it's about time as well, Tom. Like, I suppose, depending on the university you're in, you get a certain allocation for supervision. We all know that allocation isn't only the tip of the iceberg of what's actually involved. You know, we all know that. It's a long, long, long journey. So I think it's down to supports, it's down to time, being able to sit down with the student. You know yourself, like those of us who have research students, when you sit down with the student and have the conversation, you know they're at the races or not. Yeah. We know it. We know ourselves whether, you know, maybe they're just trying to get by for this meeting or not, whether they've done the deep work. So I think if you walk the walk back to our marriage, walk the journey, have the conversations, listen, like to all my relationships, you have to listen and see what are the troubles and the tribulations from time to time. And they change over the course of our marriage, or 4 years or 6 years, they do. And things crop up. But I think it's going to be about time, about listening, about supports, and navigating and look to new ways. And as I said in my presentation, I think we're archaic in our examination of this whole Viva. I think that's another pinch point for supervisors. That day, I always say myself, my own Viva might have been hell, but I think bringing a student that you've invested in for 6 years and to that day of Viva, it's nerve-wracking. Yeah. And I think that needs to change. That final pinch point needs to change, and we need to move back and have, you know, other checks along the way where they're passing. That they're actually with the external examiners, because we have 2 now in our procedures that will walk that journey as well. Yeah. You know, so change the process that will help to encourage new supervisors, I think.
So sorry, just as you're talking there, and I was just wondering, as we move from the more metric-based way of assessing research, regardless of career stage, and that movement towards more diverse outputs, do you think that hopeful trajectory towards that will take away that kind of, you know, that metric driven that drives maybe people under pressure to use AI responsibly, and so it brings the human element back into
absolutely, because that came out from the research, you know, where a lot of students were when they were under pressure, and if you go back again, you know, we seem to be peeling back the layers the whole time to traditional cheating and plagiarism. Why does it ever happen? Why do students cheat? Or why is there plagiarism? In the main, humans, the tendency is to try and do the best they can and do good. People don't set out really, you know, our students, when they come into the university on day one, they don't come in their bag and say, oh, I'm going to cheat my way through this now. They don't. No. And I mean, particularly for PhD students, they want the best output. They want to be an expert in the field. So I think it's back to basics really in that sense, you know, and I think the pressure points, time and all that will maybe create a space where people are more tempted. So if we can reduce that and have more supports, more time, it's both supports really. And where students, maybe they need different, I suppose, benchmarks along the way, and have those pressures taken off. So in other words, as I mentioned earlier, when it comes to literature, have that pass-fail. When it comes to methodology, pass-fail. And then the final point as well. I think we can actually take a lot of the pressure off our students if we just relook at reassessing. I suppose there's always this push, when you think of university context, there's always the push for the undergraduate programs, isn't there? Oh, let's look at them, let's redesign them, let's look at assessment. There's less visibility, or not visibility is the wrong word, but less focus in on how are we going to, should we reassess how, masters, outputs, or PhD. It's just archaic, it's sitting there the whole time.
Same way as we did it 30 years ago.
Exactly, when I did it, exactly, yeah, exactly.
Things have changed so much.
Exactly.
Sean, do we have anything from the?
So I suppose it's just a couple of times there, open discussion and dialogue, as we mentioned here, which is just, there was a comment that came in to that last question. Look, AI, it's a big challenge for research, but manageable if there is the will to learn, guide, and discuss. I thought that was one of the comments that came in there. It's not on the screen, but so look, there's still a couple of questions that we haven't answered. I think that's really a good sign to show the engagement that's both here in the room and then online. But we just do one more. And this, Nick, you started off this by mentioning a Nobel Prize winner. So for research, so David Baker for AI generating protein structures. Is it encouraging the use of AI in scientific research, and is it ethical?
Well, it's certainly encouraging use of the tools in scientific research. And I mean, to be honest, it's been happening in industry for decades. Like, that's the way that work happens outside of universities. Universities are only just starting to catch up to the idea that protein synthesis, novel drug interactions, all of those things have been automated for a very long time. And one of the things I didn't show was there was a company that does this work, and they've been using AI to generate novel drugs for about 10 or 15 years. And they publish something like 80 to 100 papers a year. And all of that is AI generated. And they had no concept that anyone else would think that was inappropriate. It was only when this started to blow up in universities and people started to say, oh, you can't do that they went, hang on a minute, what do you mean? We've been doing that for years. So I think to some extent, we're just a little bit siloed in our understanding of how the world is working. Is it ethical? I think that really depends on the field and what you're doing with the tools. I think you could very easily do things that are unethical with them, but you could also use them in ways that are for good.
Yeah. And just when you were kind of saying, look, the industry are using it, but we're really kind of catching up to certain things. That just reminds me, Tom, of a point that you'd often make. You correct me now if I'm misquoting you here, but it's just that when we're looking at producing graduates, we want them to be industry.
Yes.
So it's for us then to kind of embrace this, but obviously in some way responsibly.
Yeah. No, we talk about producing 21st century graduates. Well, the graduates are going into a world where GenAI is an integral part of a lot of those industries. And if we're not preparing them for that, then we're not doing our job. And so I think that's the thing. But I mean, one thing that's come through from the three of you there, yes, the technology's there, but at the heart of stuff is communication, good relationships, and trust. That hasn't changed. The technology has morphed. But as I said, if you produce people who think that jumping on the back of someone else, passing off someone else's work as their own is right, then we haven't done a good job. Yeah, I think that's it.
It's about back to robust processes. What do we stand for as a university, and what are our graduates going to look like?
And role modeling
and
that
culture,
for our
their
graduates.
role modeling and their culture and their ethos, and what are they going to take into the future? What's going to be our legacy really is what you have to think about.
And also, what is the fundamental purpose of science? It's doing good to the society. So if we can get AI to help us doing good for society, then why it should be unethical?
Very good. Look, we're coming up to time there, but
I think you touched on a very interesting point there in terms of what are we actually doing in university. So, and I suppose in teaching here for a long time, about 40% at this point. I suppose essentially our fundamental one is twofold. Very definitely to produce an industry-ready graduate. And we see that in programmatic, 4, 5 years, 6 years, what have you. But I think what's being circulated to the background in the context of this discussion, but we're also very much in the business of education and such. And ultimately, really, and I think actually you actually touched on the point earlier about the idea of creativity and critical thinking. And certainly in terms of producing our honours graduate, essentially, and for me, the learning outcome effectively would be critical analysis. And I think if we are certainly maybe not necessarily discouraging a tool, but grey as to whether, for example, it's acceptable. Emeritus basically that actually can water down or undermine essentially the efficacy effectively of the factors that we're producing. I would say, and I also take the point of Terry Box with basically the fact that answer and plagiarism exclusively without question and such. I would say that basically it is a source. The source which is extrinsic, it's actually outside of the actual individual themselves and such. And any source, and I certainly teach research like this over the 4 years here, any source basically has to actually be acknowledged. Whether it's a published work or like for example, we have to take everything that it shouldn't actually be regarded as indifferent. And no, I embrace obviously its effectiveness, its contribution, but we need to be mindful going forward. And I also do support the dialogue and checks. I mean, ultimately, I suppose the discipline that I actually come from here, there's a very powerful, I suppose, quote that actually comes through, whereby a lot of the designers basically don't want their ideas actually infected by other people's work. And that didn't come from me as such. So a lot of people, in the design field, they certainly don't want any consultation with anybody else's ideas, generation or other else's. So there is, I suppose, a revisiting, and very often I think when we actually come to a crisis within education or within information processing, which I think is where we are now. I think it's why we're actually having the discussion and such. We very much go back to the fundamentals. It is about discussion, it is about multiple checks, it is about actually human interface, speaking to the student at different strategic points and such. And I think ultimately, if the crescendo comes to us in the context of Viva, particularly, for example, doctoral level, I think that certainly needs to be designed as well. But it's a very interesting conversation, it's a very interesting agenda. I think we need to embrace it. We had a similar conversation, I think, actually here a while back, whereby we came to the conclusion that we're not to be fearful of this as such. We need to embrace it. That's it. It's all, but it's been there for a long time. Now it's been exaggerated, but it has potential. It's like anything, it has potential, it has a downside as well. And I'm quite sure at the rate that this is actually generating, we're likely to be contending with even more exaggeration issues into the not too distant future.
That's so just maybe open communication again and having that discussion, which each of our speakers has touched on. Angela had it as one of the kind of learning points or guidelines that you had in yours from your own research, which is interesting. We've gone past time, but we've allowed 15 minutes for closing remarks, so we won't need that. No. I was just going to say, would we maybe final word to each of our speakers on the topic, and then Tom and myself would just close this out. But we will be finished by past, because that was the time we said. Tomáš, anything you'd care to maybe say, advice to participants here, or anything you wish?
I would like to reinforce what I said already several times, that the GenAI tools don't bring anything new, any new threats in principle. And as with also the PhD supervision, we could see that there have been a lot of supervisors not doing their jobs properly, like for decades, and the universities were not addressing it. Not addressing the problem. Now with GenAI, maybe it becomes an issue. And also scientific misconduct or student misconduct, a lot of the forms were not properly addressed. It's not a case of plagiarism because it can be easily more or less detected by the software, and then you have the evidence, and it's easy to catch students. But then the contract cheating was not really addressed. In science, the paper mills are there or have been there for decades, and it was really difficult to get these topics into the public discourse, into the management focus. But now with generative AI, everybody is aware about these issues because they become so obvious that people can't really ignore them anymore. And I'm really grateful that this happens because the ethical aspect is always present in these discussions. More than it was before. So I think that in the end, it helps to shape the ethical aspect of what we are doing in academia.
Angela?
I suppose I'm going to focus on the supervisory piece, and I would say I would encourage academics that haven't started supervising to supervise, even in light of everything we've discussed today, and supervisors that are currently doing to keep going, and people that might have left it to think about going back to it. Because if we think about it, without supervisors, without experts, without outputs, doctoral outputs, you know, we're not going to have the new knowledge that's going to shape us anyway. So for by what we're using, tools or otherwise, we need that knowledge and critical mass moving forward.
I think that we're at a really interesting juncture where we're being forced to re-evaluate all of the things that we do as an institution, as a sector, and I think that's healthy. It's also oftentimes when we see a disruption like this, it only impacts a handful of disciplines, whereas this actually impacts everyone. And it's really, it gives us an opportunity, it gives us that impetus that you're talking about to actually focus on what does it mean to be an ecologist? What does it mean to, you know, what are the things that we can teach, and what are the values that we need to instill? And I think that there are a couple of things that we didn't touch on that are useful here. One is thinking about your discipline. What are the things that you value in the discipline? And what are those things that you have to be absolutely sure that your students are competent in? So that's about securing your assessment. And then everything else is open to some kind of level of collaboration with AI. And once you kind of figure out what those pieces are in your program, I think it's much easier to deal with the other challenges that you face. And I also say, be wary of people like us sitting up here, because a lot of it's snake oil at the moment. Still, like there are a lot of brand new AI experts that appear, and yeah, it is changing so rapidly that no one can be a real expert at the moment. So that's why exploration is really important for everyone. I think just jump in and play with them, play with the tools, find something that's actually useful to you, and also that's the only way you really figure out what the limitations are.
Right. Thanks very much. I think maybe a round of applause there for. There are questions still on the slide, but it's important that we try to keep the time as best as possible. So maybe I think just maybe close off with a few thank yous.
Yeah.
I think first and foremost, thanks to our panel.
Absolutely.
3 speakers. I mean, 3 excellent presentations that we had.
Yeah.
Great kind of responses and knowledge and experiences, kind of very evident in the presentations and the answers to questions, and even in the panel here, the discussion here. Brilliant. Thanks very much.
Yeah.
Thank you. Participants, both here in the room and online. Sure, these events, you know, they don't happen without there actually being participants, and you can clearly see that there has been great engagement, and that gives us energy in the room. It gives us energy to even kind of say, yeah, we're on the right track. Let's go off and try to do something else. And there's different ideas that will be growing because of that. N-TUTOR, definitely, Tom, do you want to say?
Yeah, I think, like, and as someone who's done secondment to N-TUTOR and along with Angela, and we'll be back to our day jobs on the 1st of January. So, but I think N-TUTOR, and thanks to the EU funding, has made it possible. The amount of initiatives, training, resources, which has N-TUTOR has helped to fund, has been absolutely phenomenal. The amount of people who are talking about teaching and learning and assessment across the country, across the 7 institutions, has been absolutely phenomenal. Too often, as I said, we want to have the space to talk and think, but we don't often have the resources, and N-TUTOR has given us that space to there. In terms of the technical stuff, Jeremiah Spillane and the TEL department and the road staff, as always, the one thing I'd have to say is I do think MTU Cork really produces some excellent hybrid events, and I think a lot of that is down to Garrod and the TEL team. But a particularly big thank you to my new colleague, Sinead MacDonald, who's joined the HREC recently and was given a crash course in doing all of this stuff, like bringing up the slides, bringing the questions. So, I mean, can I get a round of applause for Sinead? My own final thoughts, I suppose, is that I'm a huge movie buff, and one of my favourites is The Departed, but we won't talk about that. So another favourite one is The Matrix. And I think at the moment we are faced with, do you take the blue pill or the red pill? You take the blue pill, you go back to bed, you wake up tomorrow and the world is the way it always was. Or we can go down the rabbit hole and take the red pill and see the world the way it is now. I think if you didn't swallow the red pill, you've at least put it into your mouth.
Thanks very much, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. We're out.